بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد الصادق الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we are gathered again today to study the work Mataharatul Qulub, the Purification of Hearts of Imam Muhammad Mawlud al-Yaqubi rahmatullahi alayh. And today, inshallah, we're going to look at two diseases of the heart. The first one is called Tulul Amal, often translated as false hopes or prolonged hopes. And the second disease is Tatayur, which is not listed in the PDF, but it's included in this section. And Tatayur is superstition, basically. And we'll look into each of these now. Imam Muhammad Mawlud is still talking about the disease of Tama', which is the root of so many of the diseases that we've been learning about throughout the month of Ramadan. And he segues, in discussing Tama', he segues into a discussion on false hopes called Tulul Amal, and says its quick-acting poison is extended false hope, which is assuring yourself that death is a long way off. So this disease is linked with Tama', with that covetousness. Tama' spreads when a person has this disease of false hopes and prolonged hopes. And he defines it very precisely here and says that it is to assure yourself that death is a long ways off. In Arabic, we have a number of words that describe different types of hope. And some of these words, in fact all of them, are in the Quran. One of them is raja, often translated as hope. The other is amal, translated as hope. The other is umniyah, which maybe is translated as wishful thinking. So it's kind of like a hope, but it's more along the lines of wishful thinking. And there are differences between these linguistically as well as in their Quranic usage. Usually in the Arabic language, amal is a hope for something that will be obtained much later in the future. And there's a distinction between raja as hope and amal as hope. Usually amal has a negative connotation in our tradition when compared to raja. And raja is an act of the heart that manifests in our limbs and how we behave in the world. So we need to look at some of these things so that we understand what exactly is the disease of prolonged hopes. So the scholars remind us that amal, in the root sense of the word, is hoping for something that is a long ways off. And it's a divine mercy that we have that long-term hope for things to bear fruition. For instance, without amal in our nature, we will be unable to plan for the future. We will not fill the earth. We will not populate the earth. We will not fulfill our purpose in the earth as khulafa, as vicegerents, as stewards of the earth. Because you need to have amal in order to plan for the long term. Without amal, there would be no civilization. Without amal, there would be no science. Without amal, there would not be anything of enduring value that would allow human beings to survive and thrive, fulfilling their purpose in this world as khulafa, as vicegerents and stewards of the earth. So it is a mercy from Allah Ta'ala that we have the instinct to amal, to plan for the future. Without that, what value is there in doing anything? People would not get an education if they didn't have amal. People wouldn't plan societies or cities. They wouldn't build structures. They wouldn't do anything unless they can assume that tomorrow will be like today, and a month from now will be similar to today, and then we can chart a course and plan for the future. This is why we do everything that we do in the world. So that's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a couple of points here that we have to be aware of. Number one, that amal is a gift, for it allows us to plan in the future, recognizing that tomorrow is going to be like today. At the same time, that conviction is based on the fact that it's observed. It's based on ada, meaning empirical phenomena. We observe that today was like yesterday, and yesterday was like the day before it. There are similarities in the fact that the sun rose and the sun set, that different things occurred. There were certain patterns in existence that we can use to predict what's going to happen tomorrow and the day after. This is all ada. I'm hungry and I eat food and I feel satiated. I can predict based on that if I'm ever hungry again, I can eat. This is all ada. It's all empirical phenomena. And this is how we live in the world, with some sense of predictability. That's a gift. That's a great mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the same time, we acknowledge that there's nothing necessary about those patterns unfolding the way they do. For instance, and we've mentioned this a lot, the staff of Musa alayhi salam, it had a number of functions. He would use it to walk and to shepherd his sheep. وَلِي فِيهَا مَآرِبُ أُخْرَى, and I have other purposes for it, he said. And he threw it down when Allah Ta'ala told him to throw it down. And when he threw it down, it didn't remain as a staff. It turned into a snake. So when you throw down a staff, it doesn't have to stay a staff. Allah can transform it as He likes. But you can throw a staff down 1,000,000 times, it will remain a staff, because that's the predictability that Allah Ta'ala has placed in the cosmos at every moment. This is called ada. There's nothing necessary about those patterns. It's all a mercy that Allah Ta'ala sustains them at every moment so that we have predictability and stability and a stable ground on which to build what we have. So what's blameworthy is not having a sense of the future, of planning for the future and having hopes of doing things that will ensure our survival. What's blameworthy is the amal that is a cause for laziness, for heedlessness, for turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the amal that is more accurately translated as procrastination. It is the feeling that a person is safe from these things because he has forever. He doesn't have to worry about the bad things he's doing. He doesn't have to worry about preparing for the hereafter because he has all the time in the world. So because of those lengthy hopes, this person neglects preparing himself for leaving this dunya and meeting Allah Ta'ala. Because of their lengthy hopes, they delay tawbah. This, Imam Muhammad Mawlud says, creates a lot of problems. This attitude that we have forever, this tulul amal, prolonged hopes, creates procrastination, and this in turn leads to many negative spiritual states and qualities that give rise to diseases and that cause certain sins to manifest. He says, continuing, the lengthy, prolonged hopes, generates hard-heartedness and indolence regarding obligation, which leads to inroads to the prohibited. So he's saying here that having these lengthy hopes about the future, where we procrastinate in preparing for the hereafter and meeting Allah and delaying tawbah, he says it leads to hard-heartedness and it leads to laziness in fulfilling obligations, and it leads to a person falling into the haram because they become lackadaisical and careless about these matters. The first effect of lengthy hopes he mentions is hard-heartedness. And when we go back to the Holy Quran, we see that Allah Ta'ala mentions this problem among people when the time is prolonged for them. Allah Ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Hadid, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. And this is revealed in Mecca 4 years after the Prophet ﷺ was sent with the prophetic message. 4 years out of a 13-year period. Allah Ta'ala says, has not the time come for those who have believed that their hearts should be humbly submissive to the remembrance of Allah and what He has revealed of truth? 4 years after the mission. Lest they become like those people who were before them, who were given the book before them. فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ فَقَاسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَكَثِيرٌ مِّنْهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. He says, lest they, this is the Muslim community, 4 years after the sending of the Prophet ﷺ, lest they become like those nations before them, those bygone communities who were given the book before them. فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ. Then the period, the time was prolonged for them. فَقَاسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. And as a result, their hearts became hard. And many of them are corrupt. This verse is very powerful because it shows us the link between having a prolonged time and the heart becoming harder. How many a person, either they convert to Islam or they live many, many years as Muslims, but they don't have a strong commitment, and then something happens. They're inspired to make tawbah and make changes and take the deen seriously. And then after some years, whether for them or the convert, that fervor dies down. And what was easy to avoid early on becomes hard to avoid. What was easy to do and they did frequently now becomes difficult and weighs heavily on them. Where there was energy, now there's laziness. Where there was activity, now there's lethargy. This is the phenomena of what happens when we let our hearts go. Al-istirsal, as they say in Arabic. Letting the heart go, letting things accumulate over time. With the slow drip of the things that come into our eyes and our ears, the slow drip of poison as a result of what we say and what we do and what we neglect, the slow or even fast drip of poison to our hearts based on what we do towards other people. After a long time of this, the heart gets darker and darker and darker, as Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Nay, the darkness has encrusted their heart because of what they used to earn. And this happens after an extended period of time. And this is why طُولُ الْأَمَلِ is such a problem, because when a person thinks they have forever and behaves as if they have forever in matters of deen, not dunya, it leads to hard-heartedness. And Imam Muhammad Mawlud goes on to add that it also leads to indolence regarding obligations. Indolence here means at-takasul, laziness. And really there's a difference between kasal and takasul. Kasal is laziness. Takasul is really faking laziness. It's because there's energy. The person will expend energy in things they deem valuable in matters of dunya. But when it comes to expending energy in what is drawing them nearer to Allah Ta'ala, in preparing for the hereafter, they become lazy. So that person, they don't have real laziness, they have fake laziness. And prolonged hopes leads to this fake laziness, where a person will direct their energy to dunya, things that distract them from Allah Ta'ala. As we've said before, dunya is not just the stuff of the world, because you could earn your livelihood and have the stuff of the world, but your heart is preoccupied with Allah Ta'ala and using that dunya for good. Dunya in the negative sense is كُلُّ مَا يُشْغِلُكَ عَنِ اللَّهِ, everything that preoccupies you away from Allah Ta'ala. So that person has energy for dunya, but when it comes time for just to say the 5 daily prayers, they have no energy. They have a million excuses why they can't pray or why they can't pray on time. But they don't have any excuse when it concerns getting to work, doing the overtime, getting the money, and getting after it in that fashion. So it's not really laziness. It's a feigned, fake, affected laziness. And Imam Muhammad Maulud says that this comes from tulul amal, having these lengthy hopes. And so what happens is an inversion. The person thinks, because our attitude should be that when it concerns dunya matters, we have all the time in the world to make money. We have all the time in the world. But when it concerns the hereafter, we don't have time. We have to get after it. We have to have a sense of urgency in getting our hearts right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says that the effects of amal, prolonged hopes, are hard-heartedness and being lazy or feigning laziness. And the last one he says it leads to inroads to the prohibited. This in turn leads one into the haram because they think they have forever to repent. So this person will not make tawbah because they think they have all the time in the world to get better. They think somehow that in their 30s and 40s they can neglect the rights of Allah Ta'ala. They could do any manner of haram things that are displeasing to their Lord, things that tarnish their soul, and that they'll get things right when they're 60 and retired. They'll be the uncle who comes to the masjid all the time. There's no guarantee. It causes one to forget the hereafter. It causes one to crave after dunya. So these are the ill effects of prolonged hopes. He goes on to say, regarding one who is engaged in preparing for tomorrow or writing works of knowledge, extended hope is not blameworthy. This should be obvious, that it is not blameworthy to have long hopes when you are planning out something that's good. When you are preparing for something that takes a long time to complete and it's good, that's not a blameworthy prolonged hopes. You're hoping that Allah gives you a long life so that you can complete that beautiful project that's going to serve people, that's going to be a means of you drawing nearer to Allah Ta'ala. That's completely fine. As far as the remedy for prolonged hopes, he doesn't mention it here directly, he mentions it later on, and he's alluded to it earlier in the text. The remedy for prolonged hopes is remembrance of death constantly. Not just thinking about it passively, but actual visualization. A person who visualizes death as the reality, they will realize that it can come at any time, and this will be a remedy. Imam Ahmad Zarruq, rahmatullahi alayhi, he says, دواؤه دوام ذكر الموت والجد والتشمير خوف الفوت. The medicine or the remedy for prolonged hopes and procrastination is remembrance of death, along with strenuous efforts out of fear of losing the opportunity, of losing the chance to make things right. And this is what he says regarding the matter of prolonged hopes. Moving along now, we go to the next disease that he dedicates only one line to, and it is the disease called tatayyur. Tatayyur is translated as omen seeking or superstition. He says in this one couplet, as for omen seeking, it is rooted in ignorance of the fact that the entire affair of this life is Allah's alone. This disease is called tatayyur in Arabic, and that word tatayyur comes from the word for bird, tayr, and that is because in pre-Islamic Arabia, that was the main form of omen seeking. Tatayyur, what people would do, they would go out, and if they had a plan, they wanted to decide whether they should travel or marry or engage in this or that trade, they would seek an omen to confirm whether they should move forward with it or give it up. And they would go outside, and when they would encounter a flock of birds, if the birds flew to the left, they would not engage in the matter that they were thinking about. So if they were going to marry someone and they went out and saw the birds fly to the left, they wouldn't get married. Or they wouldn't take a trip if they planned a trip. On the other hand, if the birds flew to the right, they would proceed with the trip or proceed with the marriage and so on. So they were using the flight of the birds to the left or to the right as the omen to determine the outcome of what they were planning to do. And this is the original usage of the word tatayur, but it came to be applied to any form of divination and superstition. And Imam Muhammad Maulud here says that it is rooted in ignorance. It is rooted in ignorance, and essentially superstition is based on making decisions about things or fearing things based on non-normative experience. Now earlier we were talking about ada, about the empirical phenomena, and how it's a blessing from Allah Ta'ala that there are patterns in existence so that we have a structure for planning for the future and surviving. Now there are normative experiences and there are non-normative experiences. So for example, if you walked into your basement and saw a snake, you would be fully justified in running back upstairs and shutting the door. You'll be fully justified in getting away from that snake. Why? Because there is a normative experience among human beings and even animals that when they get around snakes, especially if they are poisonous snakes, those snakes can attack, they can bite and release their venom and cause a lot of problems. That's based on normative experience through ada. So adatan, if you get around a snake and get bit by it, if it's poisonous, it's going to hurt. And you react to seeing the snake based on the normative experience. That is completely fine. That's not following an omen or being superstitious when you see a snake, because it's based on normative experience. But if a person reacts in a similar manner to something and it's not grounded in normative experience, that would be superstition. So we have a lot of examples of this in the West. We have the idea that it is bad luck for a black cat to cross your path, or that it's bad luck to walk underneath a ladder that's propped up, or that if you spill salt, you should throw it behind your left shoulder to prevent bad luck, or that it's bad luck to break a mirror, or that it's if you want to have good luck, you knock on wood. All of these, or most of these superstitions, are rooted in pre-modern Europe, pagan Europe, and post-pagan Christian Europe, some of the practices, based on their understanding about demons and things of that nature. But they're all based on non-normative practices or non-normative events and experiences. There's nothing normative about a black cat harming someone if it crosses their path. There's nothing normative in our experience connecting walking underneath a ladder to bad things happening in other areas of our life. That is superstition. And superstition is based on ignorance. It's based on jahl, as Imam Muhammad Maulud says, ignorance about the fact that Allah Ta'ala is in control. Now we have examples of superstition in Muslim majority countries and in other regions of the world, other than the black cat and the broken mirror and the walking under the ladder. In the Muslim world, we have examples of this in the form of superstitions like casting rocks or casting bones, what's called raml. You have divination in the form of reading tea leaves in some parts of Asia. You have other forms of omen seeking through people who will open the Quran in a random place and put their finger on a verse and see what the verse is saying, and that would guide their decision to do something or not do something. This, according to the ulama, is based on tatayur. It is an omen seeking that is not grounded in the tradition. Now, the Prophet ﷺ liked al-fa'l, which is a positive omen, and that's not something you go out and seek, but it's something that comes that confirms something you were already going to do, or encourages you to do something that you would like to do. And this could happen in a variety of ways, right? For instance, one that comes immediately to mind for me is living in Fez, Morocco. I was one morning traveling, I believe it was a Jumu'ah morning. I was walking through the narrow streets in the old Medina with the intention of visiting a very pious person, to pay them a visit for their du'as and for the benefit of companionship. That was my intention. I left in the morning with that intention to do that visit and then go back for Jumu'ah. And as I'm walking to visit this person, one of the shopkeepers on the way, a shopkeeper is getting his store prepared and he's playing the Quran. And as I'm walking by to visit this person, I hear a verse of the Quran. I don't immediately remember what the verse was offhand, but it had something to do with, I think it was the verse regarding the importance of taking good companions, of having good companions among the believers. So that was a fa'al. You know, I'm going to visit this pious person, and as I'm visiting them, I hear a verse of Quran that confirms the very act I was setting out to do. That's not superstitious, because that doesn't guide my decision to move forward with the act or to stop. But it's something that was a positive omen. That's fine. The negative omens are the ones that are based on non-normative experience. They don't have a basis in revelation. There are forms, for instance, dhikr, dua, giving charity to avert harm. These are normative experiences because Allah Ta'ala has told us about them, or we're told about them by the Prophet ﷺ. So those things are outside of the domain of empirical phenomena, so to speak, that they're not measurable, but we have from the Prophet ﷺ that whoever says this dua or recites that dua, they'll be protected from something, or that charity averts tribulation, and this is tried and true. So to do those things is not omen seeking or superstition, because it's based on revelation. So if it's not based on revelation and it's based on non-normative experience, it's grounded in ignorance, is based on an ignorance of the fact that Allah Ta'ala is in control of everything. And we have a lot of superstitions, even among people who are supposed to be educated and intelligent. So having an education or being illiterate is not going to guarantee that a person will be more or less superstitious. Some of the most superstitious people in the world are world leaders who consult astrologers. We have in the 1980s here in the US, we had the case of the astrologer that would come to the White House, whom Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy Reagan would consult with in decisions. You can imagine in the Cold War, in the height of the Cold War, someone like Ronald Reagan is consulting with an astrologer, or his wife is consulting with an astrologer concerning matters of world peace. So it's not about intelligence in the worldly sense, it's about ignorance or knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah ta'ala to purify our hearts from superstition and to cleanse our hearts from procrastination and laziness. Ameen. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.